third grade. Today we're going to do some science experiments. So what we will need are 2 or 3 eggs if you have them. I also have a jar. You need a clear glass or a clear jar of vinegar. And I have a jar of soda. This happens to be cherry Coke, but you could use any kind of dark soda that you wanted to. You can pause the video, go get those things if you would like to, or you can just watch what I'm doing and then you can do it on your own later. One of the things I want to show you is what will happen to this eggshell if we put it in the vinegar and in the soda. These are raw eggs that I have right now. I'm going to drop one into the vinegar and I'm going to drop one into the soda. And that's all we're going to do with that right now. We will leave that there. We'll check on it every couple of days. In about 2 to 3 days, this should look a little different than it does right now. You can put a lid on this, put it away in a safe spot, and just leave it there. That's pretty much all you have to do right now. The other thing I want to show you is what happens if you squeeze this egg. You have all cracked an egg before. You know how that works. We know that this eggshell is kind of fragile, or at least it seems that way. If I hit it on the side of this plate, we know what would happen to it. It would crack. But you can take an egg and you can squeeze it in your hand, in your fingers like this. Wrap your fingers evenly around it. You can squeeze it like this. You can squeeze and you can squeeze and you can squeeze and you can squeeze, and this egg will not crack. The egg seems like it's pretty fragile, but when I squeeze it with even pressure all the way around, nothing happens to it. The other thing that I can do is take my finger and my thumb. I can hold this egg just like this. I can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. Again, you can do it as hard as you want. You can even have Dad try it if you want to, see if he's strong enough to crack an egg. You can squeeze and squeeze, and it doesn't crack. It's always a good idea, though, to do it over a plate, a bowl, or a trash can, just to make sure. Now, if I took this egg and I squeezed it and I put it in my hand and I put just my thumb on here and I squeezed with just my thumb, not going to do that right now, but if I did that, then the egg should explode, it should crack, and probably egg would go everywhere and it would make a mess. But remember, if you take it in your fingers, put your thumb over here, apply even pressure and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, it's not going to crack if you do it the right way. It's kind of an interesting experiment. The next thing I want to do is talk to you about our packets. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. Packets are ready. I've sent some emails out if I have your mom and dad's email. And I've explained that packets are ready to be picked up on Monday. I will be at the school on Monday morning and I will be helping. Actually, I'll be there Monday from 11 to 2, I think, and I will be helping pass out those packets. So mom or dad or someone else can come in and get the packets for you. What we're doing right now is reviewing multiplication, and there is also a new reading story in there for you. You don't have your reading book, it's a copy of your reading story. You will do the work, you will hand it in the next Monday, and then I will give you another packet. Next week's packet will have a little more information in it than the first week, but the first week is just some review, just to get us back into the habit of doing some schoolwork. Again, I want to say thank you to those of you who are doing Lexia, MobyMax, Prodigy, Splash Math, Extra Math, all of those things that you can do online. Those will all help you prepare for 4th grade. As of right now, we won't be going back to school until May 1st. Hopefully we will get to go back on May 1st, and things are subject to change at all times. But right now we're going back to school on May 1st. So I'm going to continue reading a little bit about Virginia. Virginia, again, is in the Civil War. She's in Gettysburg. She is the part of the war that happened there has ended, and she's missing Dad and her brother, and we're going to find out what's going on with them. July 14th, 1863. The McCauleys are visiting with Paul now. They are in the parlor praying for Jed. What if I never see Jed again? When my mother died, Jed was only 9 years old. He and Paul both tried to be a mother to me. They sewed my clothes. They cooked for me. Before I even went to school, Jed taught me how to read and write. But how can I live without him? July 15th, 1863. Paul tried to chop wood this afternoon, but he could not work long. His hands were shaking too badly. He has not touched his violin since he has been home. He says the music has left his heart. July 16th, 1863. Jane Ellen came by today. She brought bread and helped me with the wash. Jane Ellen suggested that Paul visit the field hospitals outside of Gettysburg between here and Uncle Jack's farm. After she left, Paul told me he was going to hitch up Rex in the morning. He is going to look for Jed in the countryside. I told him I must go with him, but he said no. He said he had seen too many terrible sights on his way to Gettysburg. He thinks I am too young to see such things. July 18th, 1863. This morning I made Paul change his mind. I grabbed his hands and held them tightly so they wouldn't shake. I told him I had run away once from a terrible sight and I would never run away again. If we go to the hospitals, I will be extra brave, I said, for Jed's sake. Paul said I sounded like my mother. He said she was very brave too. I told him I knew she was wishing we would both go look for Jed. All right, Elizabeth, Paul whispered, like he was talking to my mother and not to me. We will travel together now to every farmhouse, barn, stable, and schoolhouse to look for Jed. Please wait, Jed. Please, please wait for us. July 19th, 1863. It was a sunny day today, but no songbirds sang in the countryside. People say no songbirds have sung in the fields or woods since the roar of the cannons. Only vultures caw now. Where did the songbirds go? Did they fly away, or are they hiding in silence? As Paul and I rode through the countryside, we saw dead men and rotting horses. We saw broken fences, burned bridges, and destroyed crops. We saw mounds of soldiers' graves, but no soldier seems to have been buried decently. The graves are marked with just a bit of board, a slat from a barrel, a rail fence, a roof shingle. Names or initials are just scrawled on them in paint. We came to a farm where the wagon shed, the pigsty, and the barnyard were all crowded with wounded men, but Jed was not there. We visited 2 other hospitals, both in farmhouses, but none of the men were Jed. July 21st, 1863, an astonishing thing happened today. After a day of searching several field hospitals, we came upon one in a schoolhouse. I went in to ask about Jed while Paul waited outside. He has become more and more distressed by the terrible suffering we have seen. Inside, I discovered that most of the patients were Confederate soldiers. Many were so awfully sick, they looked beyond all human aid. But as I turned to leave, I heard someone call my name. It was Captain Heath. His head was bandaged. I ran to the Confederate officer and shook his hand. He asked why I was there. I told him my father and I were looking for my brother Jed. He said, may God help us find them. He said he would pray that Jed is alive and unharmed. Thank you, God, for keeping Captain Heath safe. You might remember Captain Heath is the one who helped her, and he told her about his little daughter Lily. July 22nd, 1863. Paul has gone to bed, very weary. By the time we came home tonight, we had seen hundreds of wounded men. At the last hospital, we met a kindly group of lady nurses from Philadelphia. One asked me to help her dress a wound. Paul kept urging me to come along, but I said I wanted to stay and help. I cut the bandage and wrapped it gently around a soldier's torn arm. I am still horrified by the pain and suffering. I have not grown dead to my feelings, but I know one true thing about myself now. I will never run away from helping again. July 24th, 1863. It has been raining hard for 2 days. The creeks have overflowed, so we cannot take the buggy out. Stay awake, Jed. Do not let God close your eyes. Do not sink into the long forever sleep. July 26th, 1863. The rain has stopped, but I fear Paul has lost hope for our search. He did not get out of bed yesterday or today. I must go out alone. I told Paul I will ride Rex by myself tomorrow. Paul did not say no. He is too worn down to think clearly. If he were well, I know he would not let me go alone. July 27th, 1863. I have stopped to let Rex rest for a moment before we head back to Gettysburg. I have ridden nearly all day. At dawn, I started down Baltimore Pike, riding past the battlefields. They were silent and ghostly. Still, not a songbird sings. I stopped at 3 hospitals on White Run and studied the wounded. None of them were Jed. I stopped at a hospital in the village of 2 taverns. Jed was not there either. I must start for home now to get back to Paul before dark. Later, I will not be riding Rex home tonight. Paul will be worried, but he will be happy to find out why. On our ride down the pike, Rex was weary. We trotted through the twilight at a slow pace. Near White Church Road, I heard a bird singing. It was the first bird I had heard in a long time. It was not just a twitter, it was a wondrous song. I stopped. I could not see the little bird in the brush, but its spirit moved me to turn Rex onto the road. Shadows were falling quickly around the white church. A light burned in the opened doorway. I hitched Rex to a tree. When I looked inside the church, I saw dozens of men on beds of hay and straw. Lady nurses silently served from a soup kettle. I asked one if I could look for my brother. She gave me a candle. I began carrying it from face to face. Before I even came to Jed, my heart started to sing. His eyes were closed, his face was hollow and pale, but I knew him at once. I knew the shape of his light brown beard, his lips, his long lashes. I knew his hands folded across his chest. He has not seen me yet. He has not opened his eyes. The nurses tell me Jed escaped from the rebels and crawled here with a broken leg. He has a fever now and has slept for many days, but Jed breathes, his heart beats. I only have to wait for God to wake him up. July 28, 1863. This morning one of the nurses will get word to Paul that Jed and I are here. I know he will come right away. I asked the nurse to tell him to bring The Death of King Arthur so I can read it to Jed. Later, Paul is here. When he saw Jed was alive, he fell to his knees and wept with joy. Now he is pacing back and forth beside the bed. He is watching Jed, anxious for him to wake up. July 29, 1863. It is long after midnight. Paul snores now, but I still have not closed my eyes. I am afraid that if I stop seeing and hearing for Jed, he will slip away into that other world. I've been talking to him of all the things he loves. I have reminded him of his books and his writing, of Paul and our mother and President Lincoln. Still, he has not opened his eyes. For the rest of the night, I will read to him from The Death of King Arthur. Later, this is the brightest morning of our lives. Did Jed hear me reading? Why else would he have opened his eyes just as I read? Lightly and fiercely he pulled the sword out of the stone. That has always been his favorite part. I laughed and cried to see him awake. So did Paul. Jed was too weak to speak. He sleeps again now, but the nurse says his fever has broken. I imagine that somewhere that little bird is singing its heart out. July 31st, 1863. Jed has been awake all morning. Paul asked him about what happened, and Jed told him how he had been captured by Rebs on his way back to Gettysburg. He had escaped with 2 other prisoners, but he soon found himself in the midst of fighting. Jed was trampled by a horse and his leg was broken. As he lay on the ground, he saw the 2 men he had escaped with get killed by cannon fire. When Jed started to speak of the death of his friends, he could not go on. He turned his face to the wall. He closed his eyes. I tried to comfort him. I told him I had been his eyes and ears while he was gone. I asked if he wanted his journal back now. He shook his head. I asked if I should keep writing until he felt better. He kept his eyes closed and nodded. And that's where we'll stop for today. I do have a challenge for you if you would like to try it. You and maybe even your family could get involved in this. This would be a good thing to do while you're stuck at home together. If you would like to take an egg and do an egg drop experiment. I honestly don't remember if we did this in school or not. I usually do it with 3rd grade. I don't think I've done it with your class yet. But if you take an egg, gather up some materials, Give everyone a time limit and let them decide how they're going to protect their egg. Do something with your egg and try to protect it. Make a parachute for it or make a basket to keep it in or something. Go up on something really high. Have someone drop the eggs, maybe you could be in charge of that, and see if any of them break or if anyone made theirs strong enough or maybe soft enough to keep the egg protected. That's a good activity for you to do while you're at home. I will see you again tomorrow.